The FDA Commissioner, Dr. Marty Makary, he heads the Food and Drug Administration in the United States. He was appointed by RFK Jr. last year. He just gave an interview on TV where he talks about saturated fats and heart disease. We're going to take a look. It's a very short video. I think it's a great example of how not to communicate science to the public. And guys, we're going to try to stick to the facts. I ask that you help out. We're not going to politicize this. It's incredibly dangerous to politicize science. Facts are facts, regardless of which political party we like.
Well, sure, we want to promote healthy fats, but, we were encouraging as a medical field people for decades to eat egg white only eggs. And if you think about that recommendation, it was really based on the flawed medical dogma of Dr. Ansel Keys in the 1960s, and it became medical groupthink. 3 large studies, gigantic studies, including 2 of the largest database studies in the history of medicine, tried to prove the association between saturated fat intake and heart disease, and all 3 failed to show that.
Okay, we have dozens of studies on saturated fat and heart disease, not 3. And even if we just look at randomized control trials on this question, there's at least 14 of those, not 3. And when we put the evidence together, what we call a meta-analysis, and we do that rigorously, we see a lower risk of heart disease events like heart attacks or strokes when saturated fat is moderated. So that's the big picture in this field. He doesn't mention any of that. He wants to focus on specific studies. Okay, let's see.
Including the famous Minnesota heart study that showed those who had the low-fat diet in the randomized trial had higher rates of heart attacks.
Okay, there was no low-fat group in Minnesota. One group was 39% fat, the other was 38% fat. Identical. There's no low-fat group. This isn't some footnote. This is on top of the first page of the study. It's the summary of the paper. So he's on TV bringing up a study that he's not familiar with. Maybe he's never read it, because the whole point of the study is to test diets. He doesn't know what diets they tested. Okay, he also said they had higher rates of heart attacks. Same place, top of the first page. They found no differences in cardiovascular events, cardiovascular deaths, or total mortality. Now, it's important to understand this trial, the Minnesota trial, was interrupted abruptly, long before it was scheduled to end. So they planned to run it for 3 to 4 years, because it takes a while for things like heart attacks or deaths to develop and accrue. It doesn't happen overnight. But they lost almost all of their participants. More than 80% of participants were lost. 75% lost in the first year alone. So the trial was aborted. And even during that short follow-up, the participants were in and out of the trial. During that period, they were on and off the diets. So it's not surprising that they didn't find a significant difference between the groups. It's totally expected. And there's more issues with this trial. For example, there's a question with trans fats. This trial took place in the 60s and 70s. A number of foods had industrial trans fats, margarines and other processed foods. At the time, this wasn't well understood. So it's very possible that one of the groups was eating more trans fats than the other. Nobody knows for sure because there's no quantification. Now, much later in the 2010s, they published some additional data from notebooks and from a thesis, including some autopsy report for a small subset of participants, about 1 to 2% of the total folks in the trial. Trial started out with more than 9,000 people. Most of those didn't die during the trial. Of those who died, about 500 deaths. We don't have autopsy reports for most. So they got autopsy reports. They recovered them for about 1.6% of the participants in the trial. And what they found was in the intervention group, 31 participants had at least one heart attack detected in the autopsy. So this could have been a silent heart attack. And in the control group, it was 16 individuals. And these folks for whom they've recovered the autopsy data, they had been in the trial for less than a year by the time they died. So interesting observation, but is this even representative of the total sample? Because they didn't see a difference in cardiovascular events like heart attacks when overall, when they looked at all the participants, not just this tiny sample. Was this caused by the oils they were given in the trial? Was it caused by trans fats in the trial? Was it even caused by foods from the trial? Because they've been in the trial for less than a year. Maybe it's a fluke. Maybe these heart attacks happened before the trial started. Nobody knows for sure. My point is, you handpick one trial with massive issues. You ignore the majority of the evidence in this field that goes in the opposite direction. Even within this trial, you handpick one observation in a tiny percentage of participants. You ignore most of what the trial reported. You ignore that overall there was no difference in cardiovascular events. And based on this, you go on this rant that all scientists are wrong. It's all dogma and groupthink. In my opinion, this is a perfect example of how not to communicate science. This confuses the public and this harms people.
And that's because when you eradicate fat, you replace it with refined carbohydrates, which increase general body inflammation.
You don't have to. You can eat unprocessed carbohydrates. But also, nobody's saying that you have to eradicate fats. Nobody in professional nutrition nowadays is saying that you have to eat a low-fat diet. We moved past that many years ago, decades ago. These guys are stuck in the past. This whole endeavor is a straw man argument, right? It's like the fixation with the pyramid. The pyramid was discontinued 15 years ago. They're still going on and on about the pyramid, the pyramid. Healthy fats are recommended almost universally by professionals in nutrition, and they've been recommended for many years. Extra virgin olive oil, fatty fish, seafood, nuts and seeds, avocados. And the main irony with this whole narrative of saturated fat is misunderstood, was unfairly demonized. They don't even believe that. They just put out national dietary guidelines that they wrote where they uphold the same limit we've always had, under 10% of calories from saturated fat. Here he is in the press conference just last week announcing the guidelines.
How much saturated fats Americans should be consuming?
I'm going to let Marty take that since he wrote a book about it.
Look, the old dogma in the 1960s when Eisenhower had his heart attack and Ansel Keys said it was the saturated fat. That's never been substantiated. And so that flawed research has become dogma over the years, and eventually the conversation was sidelined. In this new guidance, we are telling young people, kids, schools, you don't need to tiptoe around fat and dairy. You don't need to push low-fat milk to kids. And we are maintaining the 10% of calories as saturated fat in the guidance.
Does that make any sense to you? It's all flawed research. It's all dogma. It's never been substantiated. But we're upholding the same limit on saturated fat we've always had. What? If you believe that that cap is not based on good science, then why are you recommending it to 300 million people? Just because the guys before did? Just because every country on the planet does? Isn't that the definition of dogma and groupthink and being a sheep? Exactly the thing they like to accuse other people of doing. And if the science does support that cap, as you said in your official document, why are you telling people otherwise in a press conference? Completely reckless, right? Completely irresponsible, sending people to an early grave. The truth is, this narrative is very popular. People want to hear that butter is fine or even good for you. All scientists are wrong. It's unfairly demonized. It's a very popular rhetoric. But in an official document, there's a lot more accountability. So there they don't play these games. They go with the balance of evidence. And what most scientists are telling them, it's a good idea, right? So in the future, if there's a lawsuit, they can say, well, we said under 10% in the document, right? Well, at the same time, dog whistling to the public that it's all dogma, don't worry about it, just eat all the butter you want. Do you see how dishonest that is? To say one thing and do another in an official document. This is how politicians behave. It's got nothing to do with science or facts. If you find this topic of saturated fat confusing, we have a video covering all of the evidence and practical takeaways. So I'll link that right here. Check it out. I'll see you in there.